All right, let's dive into what is, no exaggeration, one of the most dramatic showdowns in India's entire legal history. We're talking about a high-stakes battle between Parliament and the Supreme Court, fighting over the very soul of the Constitution. This is the story of the Golak Nath case.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me ask you something that really gets to the heart of all this. Are your fundamental rights, freedom of speech, right to equality, are they actually permanent? Or could a government, if it had enough support, just change them? That was the explosive question right at the center of this whole affair.
So to really get why the Golak Nath case was such a bombshell, we need to rewind a bit, back to a time when it seemed like Parliament's power to change the Constitution was pretty much unlimited.
Okay, so the fuse for this whole thing was lit right after independence. You've got this new government, right? And they're determined to dismantle the old feudal zamindari system, where just a handful of people owned massive amounts of land. The goal was noble, social justice, getting land to the people who actually worked it. But there was a problem. This goal ran headfirst into the fundamental right to property. And when the court started blocking these reforms, Parliament realized it had a major fight on its hands. And for the first 15 years or so, you know what? The courts basically sided with Parliament every time. In two major cases, Shankari Prasad back in 51 and then Sajjan Singh in 65, the Supreme Court was crystal clear. Parliament's power to amend the Constitution was absolute. They argued that a constitutional amendment isn't an ordinary law, which meant the protections for fundamental rights just didn't apply. The message couldn't have been clearer. Parliament could change anything it wanted. But, and this is crucial, right there in that 1965 case, a tiny seed of doubt was planted. In a dissenting opinion, one judge, Justice Mudholkar, asked this revolutionary question. He basically wondered aloud, hey, are there maybe some parts of the Constitution that are so fundamental, so basic, that they were meant to be permanent, completely off limits, even to Parliament? This was the very first crack in that solid wall of parliamentary power. Well, that little crack, it was about to become a full-blown earthquake. Because in 1967, the Golak Nath case wasn't just the Supreme Court pushing back. No, this was a rebellion. The court was finally drawing a line in the sand. And just to give you a sense of how huge this was, think about this. For the very first time in Indian history, they assembled a massive bench of 11 Supreme Court judges just to hear this one single case. The stakes had never, ever been this high. So, what was the verdict? Well, by a super tight margin, just 6-5, the court dropped a bombshell. They said that fundamental rights hold a transcendental position. Now, what does that mean? It means they're sacred. They're placed on a pedestal so high that even Parliament's power to amend the Constitution couldn't touch them. For the first time, these rights were declared untouchable. I mean, this was a complete 180, a total flip-flop. For years, the court had insisted that a constitutional amendment was not a law. But in Golak Nath, they completely reversed course. They ruled that an amendment is a law under Article 13. And why is that so important? Because it meant that if any amendment messed with a fundamental right, it could be declared void. The shield was finally up.
Okay, so the court just drew a massive line in the sand. But did you think Parliament was just going to accept that? No way. This move triggered an immediate and powerful counterattack from the legislature. And you have to understand the political timing here. It's absolutely key. This is right after a massive landslide election victory in 1971. The government, led by Indira Gandhi, felt it had a huge public mandate to act. So it moved fast, using its majority to push through amendment after amendment, each one designed specifically to tear down the Golak Nath ruling.
Parliament's strategy here was, you gotta admit, pretty clever. It was a three-pronged attack. First up, the 24th Amendment went straight for the jugular. It basically added a new rule saying Article 13, that shield the court had just put up, doesn't apply to constitutional amendments. Period. Then, the 25th Amendment came along and said that certain social policies were now more important than fundamental rights. And finally, for good measure, the 29th Amendment shoved even more of those controversial land reform laws into something called the Ninth Schedule, which is like a constitutional safe house, protecting them from the courts.
So you have the court drawing a line and Parliament just marching right over and erasing it. This fight was far from over. In fact, it had just escalated, setting the stage for an even bigger showdown that was now, well, pretty much inevitable. And you can really see the whole journey laid out here. Just look at the progression. We start with 5 judge benches, just confirming Parliament's total power. Then boom, the 11-judge bench in Golak Nath throws up a roadblock.
But look what's coming next, an even larger 13-judge bench for a case called Keshavananda Bharati. The stakes and the number of judges just kept climbing.
So the Golak Nath case and Parliament's reaction, it basically pushed the entire country towards a constitutional crisis. It all boiled down to one massive, unanswered question. Who has the final say on the Constitution? Is it Parliament, the elected voice of the people, or is it the Supreme Court, its ultimate guardian? The stage was now set for the final, definitive confrontation.